Hey dreamer, tonight we're heading somewhere colder than your office air conditioning in summer and your boss's email tone combined. Viking winter. Not the fantasy version with perfect fur cloaks and cinematic snowfall. The real one. The dark by mid-afternoon. Ice on everything. And yes, that's dried fish again season. A world of smoky longhouses. Porridge that crunches when it really shouldn't, and fjords locked in ice under a sky that can't remember what blue looks like. Before we step into the snowdrift, take a second to like the video and subscribe. It seriously helps this cozy history cult grow. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what your favourite history topic is. Ancient Rome, medieval plagues, weird Victorian snacks. I'm not judging, I'm just quietly taking notes for future videos while you're falling asleep. Now, dim the lights. Put on a fan or some white noise so it sounds more like North Sea wind than your neighbour's washing machine. Get comfortable. Tuck your feet in, just in case your imagination starts sending in icy Viking night breezes. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever actually wondered how Vikings didn't just freeze solid, like historical popsicles with good bone structure? How do you get through a Scandinavian winter with no central heating, no puffer jacket, and no hot girl walk? Did they wake up every day already wearing 3 layers of wool and a mild sense of regret? How do you sleep in a room full of people, animals, smoke, and at least one guy who definitely snores like collapsing ice? What did they eat when everything outside was snow, darkness, and the vague sound of a goat complaining about its life choices? Did couples ever argue like, "It's not that I don't love you, I'm just tired of sharing a bed with your cold feet and this entire extended family"? Well, congratulations. You've just woken up in the early medieval north, somewhere in Scandinavia. It's the middle of winter. The sun barely bothers to show up. Your breath is fogging in the air inside the house. There's a goat breathing loudly 3 feet from your face, and your big task for the day is simple. Don't freeze to death. Good luck. You wake up to 3 sensations at once. Cold nose, warm feet, and the unmistakable smell of smoke, sweat, and damp wool that has never fully dried since last June. The longhouse is still dark, a low, timbered tunnel lined with sleeping bodies and piles of sort of blankets and old cloaks. Somewhere nearby, a baby is making tiny complaining noises, a dog is twitching in its sleep, and a grown man is snoring like an avalanche trapped in a barrel. You lift your head from the shared straw mattress, feel bits of chaff stuck to your hairline, and watch your own breath drift in the chilly haze. The embers in the central hearth are barely alive, sending up a thin ribbon of smoke toward the smoke hole that absolutely does not do its job. Congratulations. Your day of not freezing begins by peeling yourself out of a pile of snoring humans and animals, like the world's least glamorous weighted blanket. For a moment you hover in that half-awake negotiation, wondering if staying in the warm, stale cocoon is worth slowly turning into a smoked ham. Then a cold air sneaks under the edge of the covers and brushes your spine with all the tenderness of a tax bill. That settles it. Either you get up and feed the fire, or you wait for someone else to do it and gamble on lukewarm breakfast and colder toes. In this house, punctuality is measured in how close you sit to the pot. You edge off the straw mattress, trying not to step on any exposed hands or faces. The bedding crackles under your knees, and little clouds of dust rise in the dim morning light. Shapes slowly sharpen in the gloom. Roof beams stained with soot, cloaks hanging from pegs, a random foot sticking out from a blanket like a warning about circulation. The far end of the room feels coated in frost, while near the hearth there's at least a hint of warmth in a faint orange glow. You cross the packed earth floor, past the low boards that separate people from livestock. A wave of animal heat rolls over you, hay-scented and slightly eye-watering, but compared to the air near the door, it feels luxurious. One of the cows snorts, a puff of steam blooming in the half-dark, and you're briefly grateful that your central heating occasionally moos. Kneeling at the hearth, you cup your hands over the timid embers, coax them with dry scraps, and accept your daily offering of smoke straight to the eyes. They sting, your nose runs, and the longhouse slowly exhales as new flames catch. As the light from the fire grows, you can pick out the curve of a shield on the wall, the loom standing silent in the corner, the familiar pile of boots that all look exactly the same when you're in a hurry. Behind you, people shift and murmur, trying to decide whether the promise of heat is worth abandoning their personal nest of slightly damp textiles. The dog shakes itself awake. You pull your cloak tighter and sit a little closer to the fire, hair and clothes already tasting of smoke. It is not peaceful, private, or particularly fragrant, but you are upright, breathing fog into the air, and for a Viking winter morning that already counts as a small shivering victory. Before you even think about stepping outside, you do a quick physical inventory. Tunic, check. Undershirt of itchy but warm wool, check. Thick wool trousers or a long dress, check. Socks are on, the kind that feel like they were knitted out of steel wool and love. You start adding layers like you're speedrunning through a historical clothing try-on session. Another tunic, a cloak. Maybe fur if you're lucky or important or related to someone who is. Everything smells faintly like smoke and sheep, because it basically is smoke and sheep. There are no zippers, no technical fabrics, no modern miracle insulation. Just dense, oily wool that laughs in the face of snow. As you wrap a length of wool around your head like a combination scarf, hat, and existential crisis, you realize something. Fashion in the Viking winter is less personal expression, and more, I would prefer my fingers remain attached. You start from the inside out because if the base layer fails, nothing else can save you. Closest to your skin is linen, or something bravely pretending to be linen, there to keep the worst of the scratchy wool from sanding your ribs. Over that comes the first serious wool layer, worn shiny in places, thinned at the elbows, still holding the memory of last winter's snow. You tug it straight and feel your range of motion shrink one notch. Then you add the outer stuff, the real armour against the cold, a heavier tunic or overdress, belted to keep all this fabric from drifting apart like a slow-moving landslide. The belt is your storage system and your illusion of a waist under many layers of fabric. Your legs get their own strategy, thick trousers or stacked skirts, with extra wraps around calves so that the wind has to work harder to ruin your day. Feet disappear into shoes that have been patched more times than you care to count, stuffed with extra wool or straw when the cold bites hardest. Hands and head are the final exam, mittens or gloves if you have them, simple and sturdy, meant for chopping wood, hauling water, and occasionally wiping your nose when no one is looking. You check every gap, cuffs closed, neck covered, wool wrapped around your ears. Any skin you leave uncovered is a personal invitation to the wind to come in and critique your life choices. By the time you finish, bending over feels like a career decision, and sitting down is something you have to plan in advance. You shift your weight from foot to foot, testing the layers. Can you lift a bucket, reach for a tool, swing an axe without the entire outfit twisting around and trying to spin you like a top? If the answer is yes, or at least probably, you are ready. You catch a faint whiff of yourself, smoke, old sweat, lanolin, and last night's stew. There is no separate coat for work and for going out. There is one set of winter armour, and you wear it until it surrenders. You take a breath of the chilly indoor air, brace yourself, and head for the door, wrapped in wool, stubbornness, and the quiet hope that when the snow finally melts, you will still be here to complain about it. Outside, people can read your whole situation from your layers at a glance. How hard this winter has been, what you own, who you know. You are a walking weather report and tax statement carefully sewn in wool. The centre of your universe is a rectangle of stones and embers in the middle of the longhouse, the hearth. Without it, you are a human ice sculpture. With it, you are warmish, smoky, and one poorly placed cloak away from catastrophe. First job of the morning is to poke at the embers like your life depends on it, because it does. You feed the fire carefully, adding kindling and then thicker logs, trying to coax it into something that will warm the room without sending up enough smoke to fumigate everyone like unpopular bees. The beams overhead are darkened from years of soot, and your eyes sting just being within 10 feet of the flames. As the fire grows, you feel the chill pull back a little from your hands and face. This is not cabin in the woods aesthetic, this is survival with ambience. Keeping this fire alive is not a mood, it is a relationship. Let it die down too far and you spend half the morning on your knees, coaxing sulking embers back to life. Let it roar too high and it spits sparks onto stray bits of straw, and suddenly everyone is awake for the worst possible reason. So you learn the subtle art of fire volume. 1 log for normal conversation, 2 logs for very cold relatives, and never leaving it alone when the wood decides to be dramatic. Fuel is never just there. Every log that touches these coals was cut, split, hauled, and stacked earlier, probably on a day when your arms already hated you. In summer you thought you were overdoing it, building wood piles like a nervous squirrel with an axe. In winter you look at the stack, do quick mental math, and realise that every time someone says it feels a bit chilly, what they really mean is, shall we spend more of our future warmth right now? The hearth is a budgeting tool, except the penalty for overspending is frostbite. The fire does not only heat the air, it is stove, lamp, dryer, and slightly unpredictable indoor grill. Pots hang above it or sit on stones around it, absorbing heat at different speeds. You shuffle them like pieces on a board, moving porridge closer, pushing stew to the side, trying not to kick anything over as you step around. Wet boots and gloves are propped nearby, quietly steaming and smelling like a very tired barn. You live, cook, work, and argue around the same flames, because there is no separate room for any of it. There is the warm place, and there is everywhere else. All this comes with a side effect. Smoke. Some of it heads toward the opening in the roof because it is polite. The rest wanders around the longhouse at eye level, testing everyone's patience and lungs. Your hair smells like smoke. Your clothes smell like smoke. On bad days your eyes water so much you could pretend you are moved by the beauty of the flames. On better days the haze just gives everything a soft blur, like living inside a slightly confused cloud. Still, every time you stretch your hands out and feel real heat on your skin, you remember why you bother. Outside that circle of light is hard, packed snow, sharp air, and breath that turns instantly to frost. In here, around this flickering rectangle of controlled chaos, you can work, talk, eat, and almost forget that the landscape is trying to kill you. You add one more piece of wood, watch it catch, and sit back. The fire is alive, the roof is not on fire, and for the next little while you are winning. Let's talk about where exactly you sleep. It is not your own queen-sized bed with an ergonomic mattress and 3 pillows you never use. It is a shared platform along the wall, piled with straw, animal skins, old cloaks, and every piece of fabric you can justify calling bedding. You sleep shoulder to shoulder with your family because individual rooms are for future rich people and modern Airbnb listings. Privacy, never heard of her. At your feet, or sometimes terrifyingly close to your face, livestock shift and snuffle behind a low partition. Cows, sheep, maybe a horse if it is especially cold and valuable. The animals radiate heat like slightly judgmental space heaters with hooves. You fall asleep and wake up to the sounds of chewing, sighing, and the occasional surprised moo. Not romantic, but it absolutely keeps you from freezing. You, the animals, and the rest of the household form one big low-tech heating system, with hooves and morning breath. The bed itself is really just a raised shelf stuffed with whatever plant matter lost the job of becoming thatch. The straw crackles every time you move, which is often because there is always a knee, elbow, or mystery foot where you want to be. You shuffle, claim a hand-sized patch of comfort, and immediately feel a piece of straw commit to poking you in the spine until spring. This is not luxury. This is layered humans on layered debris, everyone lined along the wall like sleepy books in a chaotic library. There is a quiet system to where everyone fits. Older folks get spots away from drafts. Children are tucked between adults like extra insulation. Someone sick is nudged closer to the hearth where the air is warmer and the smoke might bully the chill away. Couples get a corner where they can pretend they are not 3 handspans from a cousin and a goat. You do not spread out, you pack in. Space is for warmth, not personality. Night is noisy in a way modern bedrooms cannot compete with. People snore, mutter, grind their teeth. Someone gets up to visit the corner pot, misjudges the distance and steps on an unlucky ankle, starting a silent feud that lasts till breakfast. On the other side of the boards, animals shift their weight, stamp a hoof, or let out long, theatrical sighs. You learn to sleep through almost anything, or at least to hover in that half-conscious state where you hear it all and decide you are too tired to care. Smell is its own situation. Human bodies with limited bathing, animal bodies with none, straw smoke, and the ghost of whatever was cooking earlier, all blend into one persistent atmosphere. At first it feels overwhelming, like living inside a stew someone forgot to season. Over time, your brain quietly files it under normal. You really notice it only when you step out into icy air and then back in again. It is not fresh linen, but it is recognizably home. For all the chaos, there is a certain safety in this arrangement. You can reach out in the dark and feel the solid weight of another person, or the warm bulk of a cow just beyond the boards. If something goes wrong, if a spark lands badly or a storm hits the roof hard, you will know together. You share air, heat, noise, and the slow rhythm of breathing. It is crowded and itchy, but when the wind howls outside and the cold presses against the walls, being one layer in this human lasagna is exactly what keeps you alive until morning. It is not like you roll into the kitchen and ask, "What am I in the mood for today?" You're in the mood for not starving. Breakfast is usually something hot, thick, and vaguely beige. Porridge made from barley or oats, cooked in the same pot that sees more action than any influencer's skillet. Sometimes there is a scrape of butter, a splash of sour milk, maybe a bit of dried fruit if someone was having a generous day back in late summer. More often, it is grain, water, and the faint aftertaste of yesterday. You eat crouched near the fire, clutching the bowl like it contains your emotional support calories. Outside, the world is still dim. Inside, spoons scrape, people slurp, and someone inevitably complains about how thin the porridge is this year. As you swallow another hot, gluey mouthful, you realize this is not a meal. It is central heating from the inside. The porridge itself has a personality. Some mornings it is almost friendly, soft and creamy, sliding off the spoon with minimal resistance. Other mornings it fights you, lumpy and stubborn, clinging to the bowl like it has rent control. You stir and stir, telling yourself the thicker bits are texture and not a structural issue. The smell is simple and heavy, warm grain, smoke, and a hint of sourness from milk that has lived several lives. Less brunch cafe, more edible building material. There is no menu. Portions are set by math, not mood. How much grain is left? How far until the next supply? How many mouths are currently attached to this household? You learn early that the wise answer to "you still hungry" is a diplomatic shrug. Ask for more when there is not much left and everyone knows you're eating someone else's tomorrow. You become very good at pretending you're satisfied. You eat fast, partly because the longhouse is cold, partly because the porridge is thickening as it cools, creeping towards solidity. Your fingers wrap around the wooden bowl, soaking up its faint heat. This is your version of a hot morning drink, except the drink is glue and the cup is a small portable sauna for your hands. Steam curls into your already smoke-stung eyes, and somewhere deep in your brain a little voice notes, "Warm food has reached the stomach. We live another day." Around you, the chorus of morning remarks begins. Someone wishes for more butter. Someone else swears the porridge was better last year, as if barley has moods. A child tries to dodge the slightly scorched patch from the bottom of the pot, and is gently informed that this is the good part. You all discuss thickness, taste, and how much is left in the pot with the seriousness of food critics who have never seen a pastry. By the time you reach the bottom of the bowl, the world feels slightly less hostile. Your hands are warmer, your insides are lined with a thin layer of beige optimism, and stepping outside no longer sounds like a personal insult. You scrape the last streak of porridge with your spoon, because leaving food is not an aesthetic decision, it is a crime. Then you stand, joints complaining, and feel the heat spreading slowly from your core to your fingers. Breakfast is over. You are not delighted, but you are fueled, insulated, and a little sticky, which in a Viking winter is close enough to a good start. Now that you're awake and minimally fed, you actually look around. The longhouse is not charming rustic decor. It is a survival bunker with better woodwork. The walls are timber, planks, or wattle and daub, sometimes banked with earth or turf, to keep the wind from slicing straight through your soul. The roof is steep, layered with thatch or turf, heavy enough that when snow piles on top, the whole structure sighs but stays standing. Windows, if they exist, are small and stingy, sometimes covered with animal bladder or oiled cloth that lets in light but not much wind. It is dim, smoky, and a bit claustrophobic, but that is the point. Every extra crack is another invitation for an Arctic breeze to come in and slap you across the face. You're not living in a house. You are living inside a carefully engineered wooden thermos that smells like stew. The first thing you notice is how much of the building is simply there to stop wind from being rude. The walls are thick, sometimes banked with turf until the whole place looks like it is trying to hide in the landscape. Every gap is stuffed with whatever you have, moss, wool, scraps of cloth, anything that might persuade a draft to go bother someone else. From the outside, it can look lumpy and slightly tragic. Inside, those lumps are the difference between brisk and I can no longer feel my personality. The door is the sworn enemy of warmth. Open it for more than a heartbeat and a sheet of cold air spills in, rolling along the floor and wrapping around ankles like a hostile cat. People learn to move through it quickly, with the efficiency of someone who knows that every extra second it stays open is one more log sacrificed later. No one stands in the doorway to chat. That is how you make enemies. Light is something you negotiate with rather than enjoy. The little windows admit just enough to keep you from walking straight into a support post. Most of the illumination comes from the fire and a few stubborn lamps. Corners vanish into shadow. The far end of the room exists mostly as a rumour. On the upside, the dimness is flattering. Everyone looks mysterious and slightly legendary when you can barely see them. The whole interior is laid out like a machine that runs on people. Hearth in the middle, sleeping platforms along the sides, animals tucked at one end, storage wherever it fits. Warm air gathers high, smoke sulks under the roof, cooler air drags along the floor. You move through layers of temperature and smell every time you cross the room, like scrolling through different climate settings in one long wooden corridor. All of this, the narrow windows, the steep roof, the banked earth, means the longhouse holds on to heat like a dragon holds on to gold. Once it finally warms up, it stays that way, as long as people keep moving, breathing, cooking, existing. Your body is part of the system, a small mobile radiator contributing to the general fog of warmth and smell. On stormy nights, the whole structure creaks and shivers, but it holds, the walls shouldering the wind so you do not have to. Decor is not really a topic. If something hangs on the wall, it is because it is useful, or needs to be kept dry. Shields, tools, bundles of herbs, maybe a strip of bright cloth if someone felt ambitious. No one is choosing paint colours or accent pieces. The design brief is simple. Do not freeze, do not let the roof collapse, and try not to make the smoke situation any worse than it already is. Firewood is not just nice to have here, it is your entire winter mood. You either have enough, or you spend February rethinking your life choices. So a big part of surviving the cold is carefully managing every log, twig, and dried piece of anything that burns. On better days, you or someone else trudges out through the snow, sled or arms loaded with wood or brush, gathered before the snow set in. You stack it near the door, away from the worst of the damp, and silently calculate how many fires those bundles buy you. Start a blaze too big, and you are warm now but freezing later. Keep it too small, and you're basically just lightly smoking yourselves like a family-sized ham. You learn to make peace with the phrase good enough. The goal is not comfort. The goal is our toes are still attached. In summer and autumn, firewood is a full-time side quest. You cut trees, split logs, gather brush, drag branches, and pretend you are absolutely sure this is enough. Piles grow along the wall, under lean-tos, anywhere that is not directly in a puddle. Every stack is a promise to your future self. Come January, you will stand there, look at the same pile and think, what fool believed this was plenty? Spoiler, it was you. Not all fuel is glamorous. Good straight logs are precious, saved for the coldest days or the longest nights. Smaller branches and brush become kindling. Twigs, bark, even dry chips are hoarded in baskets like crunchy treasure. If you are near the coast, driftwood joins the mix. Mysterious and slightly suspicious, but better than nothing. In truly desperate moments, there is always dry dung, the least romantic fuel on earth, but surprisingly useful. Practicality wins over pride every single time. Every fire you light is a tiny budget meeting. You crouch by the hearth, eye the wood stack, and decide how much of your future you're willing to burn for present comfort. Feeling really chilled, that is one more log. Feeling only mildly miserable, maybe just a handful of smaller pieces and an extra layer of clothing. You become an expert in phrases like, "It will do," and "we can manage." You also get very good at multitasking with heat. If the fire is already going strong, this is the time to cook something that takes forever. Dry boots, warm water for washing, toast yesterday's bread into something less tragic. Heat is never wasted. If the hearth is working, you bring every damp object you own into its orbit. The longhouse turns into a gallery of steaming socks, cloaks, and vaguely damp optimism. Running low on wood changes the mood of the entire room. People glance at the stack more often. Jokes get tighter. Someone suggests maybe using less at night, and everyone suddenly discovers a deep respect for going to bed early. You find yourself waking in the dark, listening to the fire die down, weighing whether to get up and feed it, or stay in the warm bedding and hope for the best. On a good evening, with a decent blaze, you sit close enough to feel your face almost too warm, while your back still remembers that winter is outside waiting. Sparks snap, shadows dance along the beams, and for a little while it feels like you have won. Then you look at the woodpile again, do the quiet math, and tuck that satisfaction away. Tomorrow there will be more cold, more logs to feed the fire, more careful choices. But for now, the room is lit, your hands are warm, and the fuel you cut months ago is buying you another few hours of not freezing. Remember those animals clustered behind the partition? They are not just here for fun, although nothing livens up a winter mood like stepping in something unpleasant in the dark. The animals are your living savings account, your summer labour force, and your central heating system. Their body heat helps warm the longhouse from the ground up. It is like radiant floor heating, except the floors occasionally shuffle and complain. You feed them hay or whatever you have stored, check their hooves, and make sure nobody is sick, because losing an animal in winter is like watching your future meals and ploughing power vanish. The air is a heady mix of hay dust, manure, and warm animal breath, and somehow you just get used to it. You scratch a cow's neck, listen to the rhythmic chewing, and for a moment the howling wind outside feels far away. You're all stuck in here together, a multi-species blanket fort of mutual dependence. The animal end of the longhouse has its own weather system. It is a few degrees warmer down there, a little more humid, a lot more fragrant. Walking toward the partition, the air thickens from cold and smoky to warm and steamy, like passing from a mediocre sauna into a very enthusiastic barn. Near the people beds, the floor bites at your feet. Near the animals, the packed earth has stored hours of quiet hoof heat. Each creature has a job long before you ever hitch it to a plough or lead it to pasture. Cows and sheep radiate steady warmth, slow and reliable. Pigs, if you have them, are like living space heaters that occasionally scream. Chickens add frantic flapping energy and random eggs in places they definitely should not be. You do daily rounds, tossing hay, breaking ice in water troughs, checking ears and noses for trouble. There is no such thing as taking a day off from feeding the heating system. Of course, this setup has side effects. The smell does not politely stay behind the boards. It drifts into the living area, mingling with hearth smoke and cooking smells to create a signature Viking fragrance that no one will ever put in a candle. Your clothes, hair and dreams all end up faintly barn-flavoured. But in exchange you do not wake up with icicles where your knees used to be, so it feels like a fair trade. Noise is constant but oddly soothing once your brain stops complaining. Hooves shift, hay rustles, an occasional low moo rises like someone humming in the background. A sheep coughs. Sometimes everything goes silent at once as the animals listen to a gust of wind batter the walls. Then they resume chewing. You develop a wary kind of gratitude. That cow is milk, meat, leather, and next month's ploughing all in one foggy breathing package. The sheep are future clothing and blankets walking around on four legs. Even the less glamorous producers, the ones who mainly contribute manure, are quietly manufacturing fertility for fields and sometimes extra fuel. Nobody in this household is just decoration. On the coldest nights, when the wind claws at the roof and the smoke hole sulks and refuses to cooperate, you lie on your straw bed and listen to the soft animal sounds drifting through the partition. The heat they throw off creeps into the floor, into your bedding, into your bones. You are a person. They are livestock. But right now you're also co-workers on the same emergency project. Keep this ridiculous wooden box warm until spring. And as survival strategies go, heated flooring that moves is not the worst idea humanity has ever had. Sunlight in winter is more of a rumour than a reliable presence. You get a few brief hours of greyish day, and then it is back to the cosy gloom. To see anything, you rely on firelight and simple lamps, bowls or holders with animal fat or oil, and a bit of twisted fibre as a wick. These do not create a warm, pretty glow. They produce a small, flickering puddle of light and a smell that suggests candle, but make it beef. You work close to the flame, eyes narrowed, hands busy, and you accept that you will never again see the inside of your own pores. Shadows jump along the walls as the fire crackles. People move like ghosts at the edges of vision. If you drop something small, good luck. It belongs to the darkness now. But even this faint light means you can keep your hands busy, your mind occupied, and your chances of despair slightly lower. The lamps themselves are nothing fancy. A shallow stone or clay dish, a lump of tallow or oil, a rag or twisted plant fibre acting as a wick that has absolutely no respect for your sinuses. You trim the wick often, or at least try to, because if it is too long the flame smokes and coughs. Too short and it sulks and goes out. Somewhere between eye-stinging fog machine and useless spark is the sweet spot you chase all winter. You sit as close as you dare, leaning into the light like a plant that has given up on dignity. Spinning, mending, carving, sorting, anything that requires sight happens within a narrow circle of yellow. Your hands learn to work partly by touch, partly by habit. Your eyes do their best, watering quietly as smoke and tallow fumes negotiate for space in your face. Eye strain is not a condition here. It is just how eyes exist. Around the main fire, the light is brighter, but also more chaotic. Flames jump, smoke drifts sideways, shadows stretch and twist over beams and rafters. A person standing up suddenly transforms into something mythic and alarming for half a second before your brain catches up. The far end of the longhouse is barely real, only shapes and guesses. If someone sits there, they may as well be in another country, shouting through a very cosy fog. Children learn early that fire is both friend and judgment. Get too close, and someone hauls you back by the hood with a lecture about how much work went into that roof you're about to ignite. Cloaks, loose hair, stray bits of dried grass, everything near the flames is a potential adventure. You move with care, not because you are naturally graceful, but because you like the building not being on fire. Sometimes, on a rare clear night, you step outside and see the sky rippled with stars or northern lights, huge and sharp and bright in a way the inside never is. Then you go back in, pulling the door quickly closed behind you, letting your eyes sink again into the orange gloom. The house swallows you up, lamps flicker, the fire hums, and the small circles of light gather everyone close. It is not bright, it is not gentle on your vision, but it is enough to keep hands moving and thoughts away from the darkness pressing at the walls. And in a Viking winter, enough is all you are really asking for. There is no hibernation mode here. If anything, winter is when you finally get to the "we will do that later" list from the rest of the year. You mend clothes, patch shoes, repair tools, carve small useful objects out of wood, and generally attempt to keep everything from falling apart before spring. You keep moving because staying still means getting cold. Your hands are almost always doing something, twisting fibre into thread, smoothing a piece of wood, churning, grinding, stirring. If you stop, even for a little while, the chill creeps in under your layers like an annoying coworker who does not understand boundaries. So you develop a rhythm. Work, shift closest to the fire, stretch your back, listen to someone telling a story. Keep working. You are not just passing time. You are packing survival into every stitch and every repaired handle. Textiles alone could fill your whole day. Wool is combed, spun into yarn, wound into balls, woven, knitted, knotted into something that might pass for warm if you do not look at it too closely. You mend tears before they become disasters, fastening patches over elbows and knees, reinforcing seams that are one dramatic movement away from giving up. Every repaired tunic is a few more weeks before someone has to risk frostbite in thin clothes. You start to see garments less as fashion and more as ongoing negotiations with gravity and time. Shoes and tools get the same treatment. You patch leather, restitch seams, add new thongs to worn-out bindings. You sharpen blades, rehandle axes, smooth splinters from tool grips. The goal is simple. Nothing should break in the middle of actual work once the weather eases. A cracked heft or split shoe in summer is annoying. In winter, it is the kind of problem that turns into a bruise, an infection, or a long walk on bare feet through slush. So you baby the gear now, when all you are risking is patience. Food prep sneaks into the chore list too. You grind grain, refill storage tubs, check barrels for leaks, skim mould, and shift things around so the coldest corners hold what can handle the chill. Milk that still appears occasionally is turned into something that will last longer. Meat is checked, fish is moved, dried herbs are sorted. It is like living inside a pantry that constantly needs performance reviews. You're always one suspicious smell away from a conversation about whether something is still food or has crossed over into experiment. Even going outside can be a chore with a side of cardio. You clear snow from paths, knock drifts off roofs, break ice in water troughs, fetch more firewood. Each small outing leaves your face stung and your nose running, but your blood moving. By the time you stomp back in, shedding snow and muttering about the wind, the indoor chill feels almost gentle. You thaw your hands near the hearth and immediately pick up the next task, because sitting still too long is an invitation for both cold and thoughts you would rather not unpack right now. By evening your shoulders ache, your fingers are cramped, and you have a small pile of things that are slightly less broken than they were this morning. A sock with fewer holes, a handle that no longer wobbles, a tool edge that glints a little sharper in the firelight. It does not look heroic. It looks ordinary, repetitive, a little boring. But every small repair is one more thread holding your winter together. You fall into bed, tired, sore, and still a bit chilly, but with the quiet satisfaction of someone who spent the entire day telling the season, not today. Let's talk about textiles. Making fabric in this world is slow, repetitive, and absolutely crucial. You take wool from the sheep that probably bleated into your ear last night, clean it, tease it, and spin it into thread using a spindle or wheel. Then that thread becomes cloth on a loom that looms against one side of the longhouse like a giant wooden skeleton. You, or someone in your household, spend hours every day turning fluffy fleece into something that can keep the cold wind out of your kidneys. Your fingers cramp, your back aches, and a dropped spindle is the medieval version of losing all your progress without saving. Every new piece of cloth is another tunic, another blanket, another chance that when you step outside into a screaming snowstorm you come back still mostly alive. Fashion, here, is just strategically arranged survival math. It starts with raw fleece, a slightly filthy cloud that smells like sheep and outdoor decisions. You pick out burrs, hay, and anything else the sheep collected while living its best chaotic life. Then you tease the fibres apart, carding or combing until the wool turns from matted clumps into soft, obedient fluff. This is the part that makes your lap look like you lost a fight with a pillow. Then comes spinning. You twist a small amount of fibre, attach it to the spindle, and give it a careful spin. The wool drafts out, twisting into yarn as gravity pulls the spindle down. In theory, this is soothing and rhythmic. In practice, it stays soothing right up until the yarn snaps and the spindle drops to the floor, unwinding itself like a tiny, judgmental tornado. You sigh, pick it up and start again, because socks do not magically appear out of feelings. Hour after hour, the pile of spun yarn slowly grows. You wind it into balls or skeins, watching your future warmth stack up in modest bundles. The thickness matters. Too fine and the fabric will be delicate and drafty. Too chunky and you walk around wearing something that feels like it is trying to bench press you. You learn by doing, by muttering under your breath, and by touching older garments and thinking, so that is what I was aiming for. Once you have enough yarn, the loom becomes your new boss. The warp threads are stretched tight, a vertical forest of string. You pass the weft back and forth, over, under, beating each row into place with firm satisfaction. The loom takes up a ridiculous amount of space and sounds like someone politely knocking on wood for hours. Lose track of a sequence and you get a flaw that will stare at you forever from your sleeve. You measure days in how many handspans of cloth you managed. Other people come and go around you, talking, cooking, repairing gear, and you sit there, building fabric line by line. Your shoulders complain, your neck tightens, your legs go numb, but you keep going. You are literally constructing the walls between your body and the wind. When a finished piece finally comes off the loom, there is a moment of real triumph. You run your fingers over the cloth, feeling its weight and thickness, imagining it as a cloak, a blanket, a hood pulled tight in a storm. It is tough, slightly scratchy, and ready to fight the weather on your behalf. You fold it carefully, already assigning it to someone. Out here, spinning and weaving are less about creativity and more about defiance. A way of telling the winter you're not going without a very well-constructed argument. You do not have the option of popping down to the store because you forgot something. Winter is the test of every choice made in summer and autumn. In one corner of the longhouse, and sometimes in pits or outbuildings, you have your treasure, barrels of grain, sacks of flour, smoked or dried fish and meat, and root vegetables doing their best not to rot before you get to them. There are cheeses in various stages between delicious and legally concerning, and fermented things in crocks that you are reasonably sure are still food. Daily life in winter is one long game of how do we stretch this. You ration, you rotate, you cut mould off with a casual shrug, and accept that almost everything you eat will taste like smoke, salt, or mild regret. You do not aim for variety, you aim for spring. The storage corner is both pantry and anxiety display. Barrels are wedged tight, lids sealed with care. Sacks are stacked where mice theoretically cannot reach them, although mice never agree with theory. You listen for rustling, watch for gnaw marks, and treat any sudden silence like a crime in progress. Grain is life, so anything that eats grain without paying rent is your sworn enemy. Roots sit in baskets or pits, cushioned with sand or straw, pretending they are still part of the earth. Some are firm and smug, others have started to wrinkle and smell philosophical. Each turnip or onion gets a quick inspection. Is it firm? Is it soft? Does it smell like ambition or like a bad idea? You trim off the worst bits, throw them to the animals and move on. Waste is dangerous, but so is feeding everyone accidental poisoned stew. Smoked and dried food is your security blanket. Fish that hung for weeks until it resembles roof tiles. Meat stripped, salted, smoked, and brought inside looking like it lost a fight with the sun. You soak it, simmer it, and talk yourself into believing that the intense flavour is a feature. Preserved food rarely goes off. It simply lives forever at various levels of chewiness. Fermented things quietly burble in their crocks, doing mysterious work while you pretend you know what is happening. Cabbage, milk, fish, whatever you had too much of months ago, is now undergoing controlled rot in the name of vitamins. You crack a lid, inhale a powerful scent and ask yourself, is this edible? Is this medicine? Or is this both? Unfortunately, the answer is often yes. Cheese is its own small saga. Young cheese is mild and friendly. Older cheese has opinions and the ability to enter a room before you do. You shave off pieces, hide it in stews and porridge, and hope the flavour lands on robust rather than threatening. Every day involves quiet calculations. How much grain can you spare for today without ruining next month? Which barrel gets opened next? Which sack must be used before it becomes alarming? You stretch stews with extra water, bulk out meals with bread, and tell yourself a thin soup still counts as hearty if everyone chews slowly. By late winter, you can walk the pantry in the dark, hand passing over barrels that feel lighter than you remember. Each slightly dubious ingredient turned into a meal is a small victory. One more step toward the first fresh greens, and a bite of something that has not lived in a barrel since last year. Here is the good news. A lot of what you drink is fermented. The bad news, that includes things that sound like a dare. Ale is common, brewed in batches that turn grain and water into something that will not immediately freeze and might take the edge off another 16-hour night. Stronger drinks exist, but they are rarer, more precious, special occasion liquids. Then there are sour milk or whey-based drinks, sharp and tangy, the dairy equivalent of you will get used to it. You drink these not to party, but because they are safer and more interesting than plain water, and they deliver calories your body desperately wants. You sip from a wooden cup, feel the slight burn or sourness, and notice your face and fingers tingling with returning warmth. Is it glamorous? No. Does it technically count as self-care? Absolutely. Ale is your everyday companion, more food than entertainment. It is usually low in strength, cloudy, a little bready. Think liquid bread someone left near a fire and decided to drink anyway. You pour it into a cup that has seen better days, watch the faint froth settle, and take a careful swallow. It is not crisp or refined, but it is filling and less likely to betray you than untreated river water. Brewing is a household ritual. Grain is soaked, mashed, heated, drained, boiled, and left to quietly transform while everyone pretends not to be nervous about the result. Yeasts no one can see, but everyone depends on float in from the air or cling to old brewing gear. You do not know their names, but you absolutely know when they do not show up. A bad batch is a small tragedy. A good one earns a few satisfied nods and the quiet feeling that you just bought yourself some more bearable evenings. Then come the dairy drinks, sour milk, whey, and things that sit in the grey area between refreshing and concerning. Sharp on the tongue, sometimes a little fizzy, they are far more interesting than plain water. They carry fat, protein, and a sense that your stomach has something to think about besides hunger. The first sip might make your eyebrows reconsider their life choices. By the fifth, it starts to feel oddly comforting. Water itself is not banned, just downgraded. Stagnant pools, questionable wells, and streams that double as animal bathtubs are not ideal sources of trust. So you mostly drink water when it has been boiled, brewed, or at least bossed around a little. If it has bubbles or steam, your chances are better. Your gut may still grumble, but at least you tried. Every cup is part refreshment, part ration. You do quiet calculations without thinking. How much ale can you pour tonight and still have enough for the end of the week? How often can the dairy crocks be dipped into before you are just stirring sadness? You stretch each batch as far as you can without turning it into flavoured water with confidence issues. In the evening, When the longhouse is dim and the wind is complaining outside, you sit near the fire with a drink in your hand. The warmth moves inward, from lips to throat to chest, until your shoulders drop a little. Conversation loosens, stories grow a touch more dramatic, and the brutal winter feels, if not friendly, at least slightly less personal. You're not here to get drunk and forget your problems. You are here to sip, stay warm from the inside out, and remind your body that even in the dark months it is still allowed small comforts. Some days you do not have to go anywhere. Other days you absolutely do, and that is when things get interesting. Snow does not mean stay home. It means time for skis, sledges, or just aggressively stomping through drifts while hoping your ankles forgive you. Skis are simple wooden planks with a strap, not sleek Olympic gear. You push yourself along with a single pole or staff, gliding over snow that would have you sinking to your waist if you tried to walk it. Sleds pulled by humans or animals carry goods, firewood, or if you're lucky, you. The wind bites any exposed skin, your nose runs, your eyelashes collect frost, and you wonder how many miles your soul has left in it. Still, the cold is easier to bear when you are moving, and the landscape is starkly beautiful in that this could kill me, but I respect it kind of way. Leaving the longhouse starts with a small argument between you and your clothing. You add layers until you feel like a stuffed mattress, wrap wool around your head, and wrestle your feet into boots already stiff with last trip snow. Outside, the world is white, quiet, and pretending to be calm. Your first step into a drift reminds you that snow is just frozen inconvenience. Strapping on skis is simple and undignified. You balance on one leg, thread your foot through a leather loop, and hope you do not topple into the nearest snowbank. Once both feet are attached, you push off with your staff and discover the strange magic of not sinking. The skis hiss over the surface, sometimes smooth, sometimes grabbing at hidden crusts. When it works, you feel efficient. When it does not, your shins file a complaint. Sledges are the winter pickup truck, a flat bed of boards, runners underneath, ropes, or a simple harness. If you are the engine, you lean into the pull, feeling the drag of firewood or sacks of grain. If a horse or ox is doing the work, you walk alongside, boots squeaking in packed snow, ready to steady the load when it lurches. Riding on the sledge is the luxury option, but sitting still in the cold has its own punishment as your legs forget what circulation is. Travel is not optional. You go to neighbouring farms, trading spots, the closest thing to a market. You check on kin, deliver news, maybe bring a sick person to someone who knows more herbs than you do. The paths between settlements turn into pale corridors, packed by many feet and runners. Step off them and you drop into drifts that swallow you to the thighs and half your dignity. Rivers and lakes, once a problem to go around, become frozen highways when the ice finally sets thick and dark. You test it, listening for ominous cracks, then glide or drag the sledge across, delighted by how much easier it is than climbing hills and trying very hard not to think about what happens if the ice changes its mind. By the time you turn back toward home, the light is already fading. Your breath comes in steady clouds, your cheeks sting, and your hands ache inside their mittens. But your blood is moving, and the longhouse ahead, a low dark shape against the snow, looks almost welcoming. You stumble inside, peel off ice-crusted layers, and feel warm, smoky air close around you. It was cold, risky, and exhausting, but you brought back wood, news, or food, and did not become a decorative landmark in the snow. For winter travel in this world, that counts as a resounding success. When stored food starts to look a little too creative, you turn to the landscape. Hunting in winter is not a leisurely hobby. It is a calculated risk. You and a few others head out into the snow with bows, spears or traps, wrapped in every bit of fur and wool you own. Tracks stand out clearly in fresh snow, but so does your own incompetence if you slip on ice. Your fingers go numb if you stand still too long, but bring back a deer, a handful of hares, or even some birds, and the whole household eats better for days. Traps near known paths, nets, and snares do some of the work while you're back at the longhouse, silently praying something walked into them and that you remembered where you put them. Winter hunting is like running an extremely cold, extremely high stakes subscription box. Preparing to leave, you layer clothes until you feel more wool than human, check bowstrings and spearheads, and shove a small snack into a pouch that looks optimistic. Someone mutters a quick blessing to whoever might be listening, and then you step out into air that bites like it has a personal grudge. The snow is both helper and nuisance. It is a giant tracking sheet, hoof prints and paw marks written in bright white. At the same time, every crunch of your boots sounds like a warning bell. You learn to move slowly, placing each step with care, trying to be quiet in an environment that thinks squeaking is a personality trait. Fresh tracks make your heart pick up. Deer if you are lucky, hare or fox if you are realistic. You follow the trail, breath puffing in clouds, eyes stinging, fingers stiff around the bow. Stand still too long, and you feel the cold slide up your arms like it is climbing into your sleeves. Sometimes it works. The animal hesitates just long enough. You loose an arrow or cast a spear, and there is that sharp moment where everything narrows to one shot and then silence. Relief hits, followed by the realization that now you have to drag this heavy gift back home without breaking yourself. Meat is wonderful. Meat is also weight. Other days the wind shifts, snow squeaks, or a branch snaps under your boot, and your future dinner vanishes into the trees with attitude. You curse, pull your cloak tighter, and keep going, knowing you may return home with nothing but frosty eyebrows and a story no one can eat. Traps and snares are your backup plan. You set them along animal paths and near burrows, bait them, and walk away hoping the local wildlife is both hungry and unwise. Checking them later feels like opening mildly haunted presents. Sometimes you find a hare or bird. Sometimes you find perfect tracks walking right around your clever work. On the good days, you bring something back. The carcass is hung, skinned, and divided with brisk hands. Meat goes to stew pots, bones to broth, fat to lamps and cooking, hide to future clothing. Voices are louder. People linger longer over bowls, and the usual quiet worry about food relaxes for a night or two. Hunting in winter is never just sport. It is a bargain you make with weather, luck, and your own endurance. Some days you win, some days you do not. But every time you stamp back through the longhouse door, stiff with cold and smelling of snow and forest, you remember why you went. In a world where every bite matters, freezing your toes for extra protein is simply part of staying on the living side of spring. If you live near the coast or a lake, fish are your winter colleagues in mutual annoyance. The water freezes, but you still need what is under it. That means cutting holes in the ice, dropping lines or nets, and standing around in the kind of cold that makes your teeth consider resigning. You kneel by a jagged hole, tug at a line, and try not to think too hard about slipping. Your hands and face burn with cold, then go numb, then burn again when you get back near the fire. But when you pull up a net shimmering with fish, you're suddenly rich. That is more food to smoke, dry, or eat right away. Fresh seafood is not luxury. It is just Tuesday, but icy. Getting to the fishing spot is half the drama. You shuffle over frozen rocks or out onto a lake that looks solid enough, testing with a pole as you go. The ice must be thick, really thick, because you are about to stand over a hole you deliberately cut in it and call that a plan. You listen for suspicious cracks the whole time, the kind that suggest a very bad idea in progress. Cutting the hole is loud, slow work. You hack with an axe or chisel, chipping at ice that does not want to move. Shards fly, your arms ache, and freezing slush soaks your mittens. Eventually a dark circle of water appears. Someone scoops out loose ice with a ladle or bucket, and suddenly the lake is open for business again, in one very specific little circle. Then comes the waiting. Nets are lowered and weighted. Lines go down with hooks baited from whatever you could spare. You crouch or stand, hunched against the wind, watching for any twitch that might mean dinner. Your feet slowly turn into rumours. Your nose runs. You shift your weight and wonder how much of your body heat has already been donated to the weather. Sometimes you work smarter. Nets are set under the ice between two holes and left for a while, a quiet ambush for anything that swims past. Later, you and your companions haul on wet ropes, shoulders straining, not sure if you're pulling up fish or disappointment. Then the net breaks the surface, silver and wriggling, and everyone finds enough energy to shout. The catch is dealt with fast. Fish are stunned or killed, gutted while your hands still barely cooperate, and packed to carry home. Some will be eaten fresh, because your body maintains a list called things with actual texture. The rest will be salted, smoked, or dried into the kind of preserved food that outlives several major life choices. Other days, you stand over dark water for hours and bring back only a few fish, and a new appreciation for fingers that bend. You return to the longhouse, face stinging as it thaws, trying to turn a small catch into a large pot of stew. On the good days, the whole house smells like sizzling fish and smoke. Bowls are passed faster, people lean in closer to the fire, and the memory of kneeling on ice in murderous wind suddenly feels worth it. You know the next trip will be just as cold and just as necessary. In a Viking winter, the sea does not really rest. It simply puts on a glass lid and dares you to keep trying. Full-body bathing in a Viking winter is not a daily pastime, it is a strategy. Water plus cold equals hypothermia if you are not careful, so you lean heavily on steam, spot cleaning and timing. In some places you have access to a bathhouse or a simple sauna-like building, stones heated until they glow, water poured over to create clouds of steam, bodies warming up. You sit, sweat, scrape your skin with a little tool, rinse with warm water, and feel like a new person who is briefly clean and profoundly grateful. The run back to the house afterward, with wet hair and a towel that is more vibe than insulation, is the least relaxing part. The rest of the time you wash hands, face and the critical zones with limited warm water and a strong sense of prioritization. Nobody smells like flowers, everyone just aims for less terrible. The bathhouse, when you have one, is the closest thing to a spa you will ever see. If spas were dim wooden rooms full of steam, naked neighbours, and the constant fear of slipping. Stones piled in a corner or a hearth are heated with a roaring fire. Once they are hot enough to make the air shimmer, the flames are damped down, the door is shut, and water ladled over the rocks explodes into clouds of scorching steam. You sit on benches, sweat running down your back, and for the first time all week you can feel your toes without 3 layers of wool. Soap, when you have it, is not a scented luxury bar. It is a rough mixture of animal fat and lye from wood ash, enthusiastic about getting grease off, but unconcerned with your delicate feelings. Often you skip soap and use sand, cloths, or just vigorous scraping with a small metal or bone scraper. Sweat, grime, and dead skin come away in grey rolls, which is both disgusting and very satisfying. You look at the gunk and think, that was riding round on me all week. Excellent. Hair gets its own routine. You wash it less often, because walking around with a wet head in sub-zero wind is a fast track to regret. Instead, you comb it over and over with fine-toothed combs carved from bone or antler. You work the comb through slowly near the fire, letting loose hairs and unwelcome passengers drop into the flames with tiny, satisfying sizzles. Clothes do some of the heavy lifting for cleanliness. Under tunics and shirts soak up sweat and body oils. Those are washed when you can spare the time and water, scrubbed in warm water with ash or harsh soap, then hung to steam dry by the fire. Outer layers are brushed, beaten and aired out, because getting heavy wool truly wet indoors is a great way to invite mould as a new roommate. Most days, cleanliness is about triage. Hands and face, definitely. Anything that smells aggressively alive, absolutely. The rest waits for bath day, or at least for an evening when you can heat a pot of water and pretend a quick wipe down counts as a miniature spa session. You get used to a background level of human and animal odour, a blend of smoke, wool, sweat, and stew. By your standards, this might sound horrifying. By Viking standards, you're doing well. Compared to many neighbours in other parts of medieval Europe, you are practically a hygiene influencer. You manage to stay mostly clean, mostly healthy, and only sometimes freezing mid-rinse. In a winter this brutal, that counts as a respectable grooming routine. Contrary to many modern depictions, you are not a walking tangle of filth. Grooming still matters. You own a comb, maybe made from bone or antler, and you use it more often than your modern self runs a dishwasher. Lice are a thing, and combing is both hygiene and pest control. Long hair can be braided or tied, keeping it out of your face and away from fire and soup. Beards are practical face insulation, but can also freeze into fantastic ice sculptures if you're out too long. You learn to drink carefully from hot liquid so you do not end up with a beard icicle situation. Every so often you trim or tidy, not for beauty standards, but because fewer things catching frost or snagging on gear is just good sense. In a world without mirrors, your look is less outfit of the day, and more can I survive in this face configuration. Your comb is one of your most useful little possessions. It lives in a pouch, a box, or tucked into your belt, teeth worn smooth from constant use. Sitting near the fire in the evening, you pull it through your hair with slow, deliberate strokes. Loose hairs come out in soft clumps. Hair length depends on preference, work, and patience. Long hair is common, but long hair plus winter means a constant risk of turning your head into frozen ropes if you go outside too soon after washing, so you braid it or tie it back. Simple braids for daily chores, more careful ones for gatherings, all with the practical motive of keeping your vision clear and your hair away from fire, blades and bubbling cauldrons. Viking chic is function first, drama second. Beards are their own ongoing project. A good beard is insulation for your face, a barrier between your skin and wind that feels personal. But wet beards plus freezing air equal instant sculpture. You take cautious sips from a hot drink and feel your moustache try to crystallize. Spend an hour outside in a storm and you come back looking like you lost a fight with a frost giant. Back near the fire, the thaw itches and stings, and you rethink some of your life choices. Trimming is done with knives or shears when you can spare the time and light. No precise lines, no salon experience, just practical tidying. You cut away split ends, shorten a beard that keeps tangling in your cloak clasp. Or tidy bangs that are constantly falling into your eyes while you chop wood. It is less about style and more about equipment maintenance. Your body is gear, and you're trying to keep it from snagging on everything. Without glass mirrors everywhere, feedback is limited. You might see yourself in a still pool on a calm day, or in a polished metal surface that is more suggestion than portrait. Mostly, you rely on other people. If nobody flinches or starts picking at your scalp with concern, you assume you are fine. Compliments, when they come, sound like your hair is not full of twigs today, or I can see your face under that beard again. Being semi-presentable in sub-zero weather is not about perfection. It is about feeling slightly more human in a world that constantly wants to turn you into an icicle. Cleanish hair, a combed beard, a face that does not feel like it is being sandblasted by lint and frost. That is the goal, plus the quiet satisfaction of knowing that even in a longhouse full of smoke and livestock, you at least tried to keep your head in reasonable order. When the work slows and the dark feels particularly heavy, you do what humans have always done. You tell stories. The longhouse becomes a low-lit theatre. The fire crackles. People settle in with their hands still busy knitting, carving or mending, and someone starts talking. You hear tales of gods travelling in disguise, giants throwing tantrums, heroic voyages, and that one local guy who definitely wrestled a spirit or maybe just drank too much. Mixed in are rumours from traders, news of distant places, and small-town gossip disguised as important updates. You listen, half hypnotised, feeling the cold draft at your back but the heat of the hearth on your shins. Outside, the wind reshapes snowdrifts. Inside, time is measured in laughs, gasps, and the familiar rhythm of someone's voice. For a while, winter is not an enemy. It is just the backdrop for your shared imagination. There is usually someone especially good at this, the one who remembers impossible details and knows exactly when to pause so everyone leans in. Maybe they have travelled, maybe they know poems, maybe they just have the dramatic timing of a stand-up comedian trapped in wool and leather. They shift voices for different characters, gesture with a knife or spoon, and suddenly your smoky longhouse feels small and the 9 worlds feel close. The myths are big and wild. Gods who lose things and get them back in ridiculous ways. Tricksters who absolutely should not be trusted, but keep being invited anyway. Creatures in the sea, in the mountains, in the woods right outside. You have heard these stories since childhood, but retelling them polishes them, like rubbing warmth into a stone. Then there are the local stories, which are really just myths with more familiar names. The neighbour whose grandfather saw lights on the water the night a storm took 3 boats. The hunter who followed a strange animal and came back with white hair and a new superstition. Are these true? Probably not. Could they be? You glance at the door and decide you do not need to know. Gossip slips in at the edges wrapped in the thin excuse of concern. A trader from the south said this. Someone in the next fjord over did that. A certain couple was seen talking a little too long by the shore. Everyone pretends this is useful information. It is not. It is entertainment with a side of social navigation. All the while, hands keep working. You spin wool without looking, whittle a peg, patch a sleeve. Your fingers follow their own rhythm while your mind goes travelling to distant coasts, storm-soaked voyages, shining halls, and monster-filled forests, all without leaving your spot on the bench. It is low energy, high imagination mode, basically a podcast with splinters. Children drift off one by one, heads tipping onto shoulders, fingers loosening on half-finished projects. Someone gently takes the work from their hands and tucks a cloak around them. The adults keep listening, quieter now, eyes reflecting the firelight. Eventually the voice slows. The storyteller finds a resting point, a cliffhanger for next time, or an ending that lands like a blanket. People murmur, stretch, poke at the fire. Outside it is still cold, still dark, still very capable of killing you. But inside your mind is crowded with giants, gods, neighbours, and nonsense. You lie down on the shared bedding, listening to a few last whispered jokes as the line between memory, story, and dream starts to blur. For tonight the longhouse is warm enough, the food was just enough, and the stories were more than enough. Even Vikings got bored. Enter games. One of the favourites is Nefertafel, a board game of strategy where pieces represent a king, defenders, and attackers. It is basically chess's older weird cousin, and losing is a matter of honour. You sit near the fire with a carved board between you and a smug opponent already planning how they will remind you of this for the next 3 months. Dice made from bone or antler clatter on wooden surfaces. Bets might be made. Goods, favours, pride. Sometimes wrestling matches break out, half playful, half serious, a way to warm up and blow off steam when being cooped up starts scratching at everyone's nerves. In a winter-long lockdown, nothing is more dangerous than a human with too much time and a competitive streak. But it keeps you moving, thinking and laughing, and that is as necessary as another log on the fire. Nefertafel looks simple at first. A grid of squares, a small knot of pieces in the centre protecting the king, a ring of attackers around them. Your job is either to help the king escape to the edge or to stop that from ever happening. Easy, you think, in the foolish optimism of someone who has never been destroyed in 10 moves by a bored aunt with a sharp mind and no mercy. You pick up the carved pieces smooth from years of use. Little men of wood or bone, some stained darker, some left pale. They click softly as you move them, that tiny sound of commitment. Each turn is a choice. Block here, sacrifice there. Pretend you saw that trap coming. You study your opponent's face, hunting for the flicker of a smile that means they think they have you. They usually do. Around the main game, others play simpler contests. Dice cups shake, bone cubes rattle, and people cheer or groan as fate speaks in little spots. Sometimes the stakes are small, a bit of food, a drink, help with an annoying chore. Sometimes they are larger, a piece of gear, a favour to be called in later. You learn quickly that gambling with someone who smiles too easily is a mistake you only make once. When sitting still gets to be too much, the games get louder. Arm wrestling at the table, shoves that turn into short wrestling matches on the packed earth floor. Cloaks are tossed aside, sleeves shoved up, and suddenly half the longhouse is shouting advice while 2 people try to flip each other like disgruntled pancakes. It is half training, half therapy, and very effective at turning nervous winter energy into sore muscles. There are rules, loose but real. No serious injuries, no breaking the furniture, no holding grudges past bedtime. People push right up against those lines, especially when pride is involved. You yourself have promised several dramatic revenges over board games that you never carry out. The threats are part of the ritual, like the first toss of the dice. By late evening the fire is low, the air thick with smoke and soft chatter. The board is put away, dice tucked into little bags, sore arms rubbed and laughed about. You stretch out on the shared bedding, mind still running tiny battles on an invisible grid. Outside the cold is absolute. Inside your world is a circle of light, crowded with people who have spent the night trying to outthink, outplay, and occasionally outwrestle one another. You may not have won, but you forgot you were freezing for a while. In a Viking winter, that makes every game a small, hard-earned victory. Being snowed into a one-room building with your entire household is like living inside a group chat you can never mute. You hear everything. You see everything. Every minor habit becomes a personality trait. Someone chews too loudly. Someone always sits in the warmest spot. Someone snoring is a known local threat. Romantic relationships evolve in this concentrated environment. You share blankets, tasks, and stress. Arguments happen in whispers or hissing low voices because there is nowhere to storm off to except 6 feet away, slightly to the left. You practice the art of pretending you did not hear that tense conversation, even though everyone absolutely did. At the same time, there is comfort in shared jokes and in someone passing you a cup of something hot without a word. You're not surviving winter alone. You're doing it as a socially complex, occasionally irritated, weirdly close cluster of humans. You wake up with someone's foot in your ribs and someone else's hair in your mouth, and realize personal space is a distant future invention. You shuffle and rearrange, trading one annoyance for another. Move away from the snorer, and you end up next to the person who twitches in their sleep like a dream-fighting goat. You get good at choosing the least bad option. Romance in this setup is both easier and harder. Easier because you are together constantly, working side by side, stealing the same warm spot by the fire. You see how someone handles stress, how they treat children, elders, tired animals. Harder because there is nowhere to have a private talk unless you enjoy an audience of 4 pretending to be fascinated by the wall. Affection is quiet and practical. A shared cloak. A hand on a shoulder while passing. Sitting a little too close whenever there is an excuse. Everyone notices, and everyone pretends not to. Arguments adapt to the architecture. You cannot slam a door that does not exist or move out when outside is full of snow and wolves. So you lower your voice and fight softly, faces stiff, sentences clipped. Then someone has to stir the pot, feed the animals, or shift so another person can reach the fire, and practical needs cut through the drama. You might still be furious, but the stew is burning and you share the same bowl. Feelings get negotiated alongside chores. The older people in the house have seen it all before. They note who rolls their eyes, who changes the subject before things explode, who is generous with time, who guards the best blanket. Long winters are excellent for character studies. You may think you are hiding your moods. You are not. Yet this closeness creates a strange safety. If you are quiet too long, someone nudges you and asks if you are ill. If you sigh heavily 3 times, a mug appears in your hands. Small kindnesses appear constantly. A mended strap. A space made for you near the fire. a badly timed joke that still makes you laugh. By the time the days begin to lengthen, you know these people on a level modern couples therapists would find both terrifying and useful. You have heard their worst jokes, seen their least flattering sleeping faces, survived their winter moods. And somehow, despite the snoring, the chewing, and the total lack of privacy, you are grateful they were there. In this climate, love is not grand gestures. It is staying in the same crowded room and making sure everyone gets at least a little bit of warmth. If you are a child in this world, winter is equal parts magical and exhausting. Snow is both playground and obstacle course. You get tasks as soon as you're physically capable of not falling directly into the fire. Feed animals, carry small bundles of wood, help grind grain, spin wool, fetch this, hold that. You are also a heat source, constantly in motion, climbing over things, inventing games in the straw, occasionally being shushed when adults are trying to concentrate on not dying. Your clothes are miniature versions of adult ones, hand-me-downs that make you look like someone shrank a grown-up and forgot to adjust the sleeves. Childhood here comes with chores and responsibility, but also with the kind of boredom that breeds creativity and very odd toys made out of bones. Mornings start early. If the adults are up, you are up. You get a small task before your eyes are fully open. Take grain to the chickens. Check that the water for the animals is not a solid block of ice. Haul in brush that feels enormous to you and normal to everyone else. If nobody sighs and redoes your work, you count it as a win. Outside, the snow is deep and tempting. Once chores are done, you fling yourself into it with the total commitment of someone whose joints do not yet complain. You pack snow into lopsided forts, slide on icy patches until your rear is numb, and throw snow at other children with full willingness to be pelted back. At some point you stop feeling your fingers, but you have never been more awake. Later you stomp back inside, red-faced and steaming, like a tiny overboiled carrot in wool. Inside, play mixes with work. You turn scraps of wood and bone into pretend animals, tiny sleds, or warriors battling across the bench. You use bits of thread as reins, chips of horn as treasure, a broken spoon as a hero's ship. You learn quickly to stay clear of adults carrying hot pots or sharp tools. The floor is your playground and their workspace at the same time, so you're always dodging and scooting out of the way. You're always listening whether anyone thinks you are or not. Adult talk washes over you while you sit on the floor pretending to make your little bone horse fight a stick dragon. You pick up weather lore, warnings about thin ice, half-understood hints about raids, journeys and marriages. The stories told at night sink deep, gods and ghosts blurring together with that one time your uncle vanished into a snowdrift. Later, when you repeat them, you will not remember where memory ends and myth begins, only that winter has always felt this big. Bit by bit you are trusted with more. Someone lets you hold a real knife while they guide your hand. Someone shows you how to twist wool so it does not knot. You fetch things before you are asked, just to prove you can. Each small skill is a step toward being one of the busy adults who seem to know what they are doing, even if you suspect they are also guessing half the time. By evening you are wrung out from cold, work and play. Your feet are chilly, your nose is red, and straw has migrated into your hair. But you are wrapped in wool, pressed between people and animals, listening to fading voices and the crackle of the fire. For a child in a Viking winter, safety does not mean comfort. It means being woven into the busy, noisy fabric of the longhouse, one small moving piece in the shared effort to reach spring. Getting sick in a Viking winter is a full-time job nobody wants. There are no antibiotics, no cosy clinics, no just swing by urgent care. If you fall ill, your treatment is warmth, rest if you can afford it, and whatever herbal knowledge your household has collected. Maybe you drink infusions made from dried plants stored carefully from summer. Maybe a person skilled in healing, someone respected for that knowledge, comes by when the weather allows. Wounds are cleaned as best as possible, wrapped, sometimes cauterized, sometimes left to the mercy of your immune system and the odds. Fevers are terrifying. A simple infection can turn serious quickly, especially when your body is already busy just staying warm. The household adjusts, picking up your tasks while you lie under extra blankets, listening to the fire and trying not to think too hard about odds. Survival here is never guaranteed. It is an ongoing negotiation. The first rule is heat. If you are sick, people move you closest to the hearth, or build up the fire a little more and hope the woodpile can take it. Extra cloaks and furs get piled over you until you feel like a very worried stew dumpling. Someone keeps an eye on your colour and your breathing. Too pale, too flushed, too quiet. All are bad signs. You drink what you are handed, herbal brews that taste like grass, bark, or regret, and you pretend they are helping because everyone else needs to believe that too. Healers work with what the land gave them last summer: dried flowers for fevers, bitter roots for pain, resins and honey for cleaning wounds. Knowledge matters. People remember which plants helped the neighbour who survived a terrible cut, which leaves seemed to calm a cough instead of making it worse. This is community research, carried in memory rather than written notes. You are very grateful someone paid attention. Injuries do not pause for winter just because it is inconvenient. You can still slip on ice, hit your head on a low beam, burn yourself at the hearth, or get kicked by a cow who thinks you are standing in the wrong emotional space. Cuts are rinsed with precious clean water, sometimes with alcohol if there is any to spare, then wrapped in linen or wool. There is no numbing injection, only biting on leather, clenching your jaw, and trying not to make the healer miss their mark. While your body struggles, the rest of the household quietly reshuffles. Someone else hauls water, feeds your animals, takes your turn grinding grain. No one makes a speech about sacrifice. They simply do it, because if they were the ones under the blankets, they would need the same. You feel guilty at first, then too weak to feel anything except tired. That is part of the illness too. There is also the unseen side of care. Someone murmurs a short prayer as they adjust your coverings. A small offering may be set aside, a bit of food, a carved token, a whispered request that the spirits responsible for health look your way and not get distracted. On the worst nights, when your skin burns and you shiver anyway, you listen to the sounds of the longhouse, a pot bubbling, someone poking the fire, an animal shifting in the dark. If you live, it is rarely because of one miracle cure. It is because a room full of tired people kept you warm, fed you water by the sip, changed your wrappings, and quietly chose to believe you were coming back. In this winter world, healing is not a service. It is a group project. When it has been overcast for the 15th day in a row and the snowdrifts are starting to look personal, you turn to something bigger than yourself, the gods. Your world is full of deities and beings with strong opinions about the weather, luck, and whether your boat makes it home. You might offer small sacrifices, food, precious objects, perhaps animals on important occasions, asking for protection, good harvests, safe journeys, and maybe slightly less wind. Religion can be as simple as muttered prayers near the hearth, or as structured as gatherings at a sacred place when travel is possible. You tell and retell myths where even the gods struggle, freeze and fight giants in snowy wastes. Somehow, knowing that divine beings are also having a rough time with winter makes your frostbitten toes feel less like a personal failure. Complaining about the sky starts to feel almost holy. Some days your faith looks like ceremony. When snow and wind allow, you travel to a grove, a rocky hill, or a stone-marked place everyone agrees is important. There may be carved posts, old bones under the soil, faint traces of earlier offerings. People gather in layered cloaks, breath puffing white, listening as someone speaks words worn smooth by repetition. A gift is given, something you could have eaten or traded, laid aside as a kind of cosmic tip jar with a silent "please notice us." Other days your faith is much quieter. A quick word under your breath when you step into a storm, a nod toward the sky when a gust finally dies down, a hand on a carved figure before a journey. Nothing public, nothing grand. Just tiny negotiations with unseen forces you are sure are watching and occasionally laughing. Certain gods live at the front of your mind in winter. A sky god who handles storms, a one-eyed wanderer who knows about fate and hidden knowledge, powers tied to harvests and safe seas. You talk to them in your head while you haul wood or scrape ice from the boat, the way modern people mutter at customer service, only with a much more mysterious response time. On long evenings, myths double as group therapy. Stories of gods trudging through blizzards, of wolves in the dark, of endless nights and battles beneath ice-rimmed skies. If even a god can get lost in a snowstorm, you feel a bit better about the time you missed the path to the wood pile. Faith also helps you explain the truly baffling days, a storm that hits out of nowhere, sea ice cracking in strange patterns, lights that ripple across the sky. Maybe someone offended a spirit. Maybe a god is sending a warning. Maybe two powers are arguing and the clouds are the fallout. These explanations do not need to be logical. They just need to make the world feel less random. Offerings are often small. A bit of bread into the fire, a splash of ale, a carefully placed bone, a promise that if things go well, you will give more later. You live where one bad season can undo years of work. It feels polite to keep the invisible neighbours on speaking terms. And always, there is the steady background hum of weather complaints. You grumble about wind, curse sleet, sigh at another grey sky, sometimes with the god's name attached for emphasis. You stand outside, look up, and give your honest review of the current climate. It is half joke, half prayer. The sky does not answer in words, but when the clouds finally part and a pale shaft of sunlight hits your face, you close your eyes and think, all right, someone heard that. Even when the landscape is buried in snow, you still have disputes, agreements, and decisions to handle. Not every legal assembly thing can wait until a sunny day. Smaller local gatherings happen when the paths are passable enough. Inside crowded houses, people argue about property, insults, debts, and the question of who moved that boundary stone last spring. Elders, respected figures, or those with formal roles weigh in. Oaths might be sworn, compensation agreed. Justice is not a building, it is a process, happening in the same smoky air where you dry your socks. If tensions run high, Everyone knows they still have to live near each other until the snow melts. You do not just drop a sick burn and log off. You drop a sick burn and then see that person every morning at the woodpile. Winter forces a certain level of diplomacy. A winter meeting looks less like a grand court and more like too many people in one room with too many opinions. Benches are pulled closer to the hearth. Steam rises from wet cloaks. Someone tries to look serious while their boots quietly leak. You sit, shift, try to find a patch of air that is only medium smoky, and listen as the matter of the day is laid out. Sometimes it is small. A cow wandered into the wrong field. Someone borrowed a tool and returned it broken and suspiciously cleaner. Someone said something sharp at a feast and now 2 households are not speaking. Other times it is bigger. Damage to a boat, a serious injury in a fight, a question of inheritance. The same room that hosts games and gossip now holds the careful work of keeping the community from quietly imploding. People speak in turn, at least in theory. You have seen plenty of moments where 2 voices stack on top of each other, and an elder lifts a hand with the weight of decades behind it. That gesture alone is enough to make everyone stop and start again. Memories are long. Someone recalls what happened 10 winters ago when a similar dispute came up. Precedent is not written in law books here. It lives in the heads of older people who remember exactly who did what and how badly it went when someone tried to be clever. Oaths matter. If someone swears by a god, a sacred place, or the luck of the family, they are putting more than their pride on the line. You feel the room shift when those words are spoken. Truth is encouraged by belief, but also by the fact that you cannot simply move away and reinvent yourself. The same faces will be at the next gathering and the one after that. Compensation is usually the goal, not revenge that leaves everyone poorer, but a settlement that lets daily life continue. Livestock, goods, or promises of future work change hands. People are rarely delighted, but if they are equally annoyed, that is close enough to fair. The important thing is that no one leaves with a grudge so large it will poison every shared task for the rest of the season. As you sit and watch, you realize winter law is not separate from winter survival. The same people who decide how to divide grazing land or pay for an injury are the ones you rely on to help haul a stuck sled or share food when a hunt goes badly. Staying warm is a group project. So is staying on just good enough terms that you can look each other in the eye over the stew pot tomorrow. Physically not freezing is one thing. Mentally not unravelling during months of grey darkness is another survival skill entirely. You keep routines so the days do not blur into one long, slightly damp smear. You work, tell stories, carve small things, repeat tasks with almost meditative rhythms. You lean on humour, a sarcastic comment about lumpy mittens, a joke about the goats, a hunting trip retold so badly it becomes comedy. You look forward to tiny markers, the way the light hits differently as the days slowly lengthen, a clear night with bright stars, a rare sunny afternoon. You have seen people who struggle more, the ones who go quiet, who stare at the fire too long. You help how you can, but mostly you endure together. It is not called seasonal depression here. It is just called winter. The first line of defense is rhythm. Get up, stoke the fire, eat, work, tend animals, fix something, make something, listen to stories, sleep, repeat. The pattern holds even when your mood does not. It gives your mind handholds on the cliff face of endless dark. You know what comes next. even if what comes next is exactly as glamorous as scraping something unidentifiable off the bottom of a pot. Your hands are rarely empty, spinning, weaving, carving, mending, braiding, stirring. There is comfort in repetitive motion. You focus on the next twist of wool, the next stitch, the next curl of wood from the knife. Time shrinks to small, manageable pieces. You are not surviving the entire season at once. You are just getting through this rule, this strap, this batch of bread. Humour does more work than half the herbs in the house. Someone imitates the way old Brander curses at the sled. Someone turns a miserable journey into such a dramatic epic that everyone wheezes with laughter and forgets their toes are numb. You poke fun at your own life before it can crush you. As long as people are still laughing, no one is completely lost. You measure hope in tiny units. The day the stripe of dawn lasts a few breaths longer. The first time the sky shows a colour that is not simply grey. A night so clear you can see sharp stars instead of a low lid of clouds. Someone points it out, and for a little while everyone is slightly less tired. You also keep an eye on each other. You notice when the person who usually talks goes quiet, when someone stops joining games or sits a little further from the fire than they need to. There is no grand intervention, just small acts of pulling them back in. A task handed over with the assumption that they are needed. A shared blanket, a cup pressed into their hands, a dumb joke aimed straight at their gloom until it cracks. Some nights are heavy. The wind screams, the walls creak, and it feels like the world outside is an endless white nothing, and the world inside is one longhouse that will never change. You lie awake, listening to snoring and the fire and your own thoughts, wondering if spring is real or just a rumour. Then morning comes. Someone trips over a bucket, and everyone starts another day because there is no alternative. In the end, mental survival is not about being endlessly positive. It is about making it to the next log on the fire, the next bowl of porridge, the next joke, the next barely noticeable stretch of daylight. You do not face winter alone inside your own head. You face it as part of a slightly smoky, slightly chaotic, stubborn cluster of people who refuse to give up. You might not know the word insulation, but you absolutely understand it. The way your home is built, thick walls, small openings, low ceilings in some areas, traps heat while trying to keep out the worst of the cold. In some places, turf, grass and soil cut into slabs is laid over roofs or walls, forming dense layers that keep wind and snow from cutting straight through the structure. The result looks like the house is halfway becoming a hill, and honestly, that is the dream, disappearing into the earth until spring. Inside, you hang fabric on walls, pile bedding in strategic places, and make sure sleeping areas are raised, away from the cold ground. You do not waste space. The longhouse is not airy and open. It is compact and efficient, every beam doing double duty. Pinterest would not be impressed. Thermodynamics would be proud. From the outside, your home is a low, sturdy shape hunched against the landscape, more animal than building. Wind hits the turf roof and slides over it instead of clawing in at every gap. Snow piles on top and stays there, which is slightly terrifying but also helpful, because that layer becomes extra insulation. You glance up at the rafters and think, please hold. Choosing where to put the house in the first place is half the battle. You do not plant it on a hilltop like a dramatic castle. You tuck it where the land offers shelter, near water, but not so low that meltwater will move in. Trees, rocks, and slopes become teammates in the ongoing fight against wind. You learn which direction brings the worst storms and avoid giving them a straight shot at your front door. Inside, you make up for what the building cannot do alone. Beds are raised on platforms or benches, away from the cold seeping up from the earth. If you cannot make the floor warm, you at least avoid lying directly on it. Fabrics hang on walls like heavy tapestries, not for decoration, but to create an extra layer of still air between you and the outside. Every extra layer, even a ratty old cloak, is working. Storage shelves and lofts crowd the upper parts of the room, not just to hold things, but to trap warm air where it wants to rise. You cram every nook with tools, food, spare clothing, anything that fills space and slows drafts. Minimalism is not a thing here. You are living inside a carefully curated collection of barriers between you and hypothermia. Doors are small, low, and used quickly. You learn to move like a ninja with groceries. In, shut, latch, breathe. Standing in the open doorway to chat is a crime against the group. One careless gust can undo half an hour's worth of careful warming. You develop strong feelings about people who do not close things properly. Even the smoke, annoying as it is, plays a role. Warm air rises, carrying smoke with it, and that haze under the roof helps keep heat from racing straight out. Your lungs may file complaints, but your toes sign off on the plan. You learn where to sit so the draft from the door misses you, but the worst of the smoke flows past your head, instead of into your eyes. Looking around, nothing here is wasted. Benches are beds, chests are seats. Pillars support the roof and mark out spaces for work and sleep. Every board, turf block and hanging cloth adds up to a simple fact. You are living inside a giant hand-built winter coat, stitched from wood, earth and wool, wrapped tight around one noisy, smoky knot of life refusing to freeze. Vikings without ships are like modern people without internet connection, still alive, but a little emotionally compromised. Winter means most large sea voyages pause, but the ships do not vanish. They are pulled up on shore, propped, covered as best as possible, and checked for damage. On days when the weather is slightly less terrible, you or others go out to scrape, repair, tar, and generally make sure your precious, frightening wooden sea weapon does not rot before spring. You walk around the hull, inspect planks, hammer in fastenings, and imagine future voyages while your breath steams in the air. The cold bites through your gloves, but there is something comforting about maintaining these sleek, dangerous shapes. They are your connection to trade, raiding, news, and bragging rights, now hibernating on land like beached dragons waiting for the thaw. The shipyard in winter is quiet in a way that feels almost rude. No shouting over waves, no flapping sails, no last-minute panic about loading cargo. Just snow, ice, and a line of long, narrow hulls sitting crooked on wooden supports, like a row of sleeping predators. Your boots crunch on frozen ground as you circle the ship, one hand brushing the side, feeling for rough patches, cracks, anything that might turn into a leak at the worst possible moment. Work out here is the opposite of glamorous. You scrape away old tar and grime, fingers going numb, then burning as blood returns when you pause to warm them. You smear fresh tar along seams. They smell sharp and oily in the frozen air. It sticks to your skin, your clothes, everything. Later, when you come back to the longhouse, people will know what you are doing just from the scent that walks in before you. Wood is both your friend and your constant source of anxiety. Planks swell and shrink with changes in weather. Joints loosen. Nails and pegs work themselves free. You tap along the hull with a mallet, listening for the wrong kind of sound, that betraying hollow note that means you will be carving and replacing a section instead of going back to the fire anytime soon. Every flaw you catch now is a disaster avoided on some future cold grey sea. Sometimes, as you work, talk drifts between you and the others. Plans for next season, rumours of distant markets, remembered raids retold for the 100th time, with extra flair and slightly less accuracy each winter. The ship under your hands is not just a vehicle, it is a container for every story that might happen once the ice loosens its grip. Maintaining it is half carpentry, half therapy. On days when the wind cuts straight through your layers, you question your choices. You could be inside spinning wool, you think, as another gust tries to rearrange your soul. But then you step back, look at the dark curve of the hull against snow and sky, and feel a small bright spark in your chest. This is a promise waiting, a path to somewhere else, frozen in place for now, but not forever. By the time you tramp home, tar-stained and stiff with cold, the shipyard fades back into the dusk. The boats remain on their cradles, quiet and patient. You know that when spring finally comes, when the ice breaks and the world smells like wet earth instead of smoke and snow, you will be back here with ropes and crew and nerves. For now, caring for the ships is a way of caring for the version of you who will stand on their decks again, squinting into wind and spray and thinking, this is why we bothered to survive the winter. Even in a smoky longhouse with everyone equally cold, status still exists. You can tell by who sits closest to the fire, who gets the best sleeping spots, and whose cup is refilled first. The household head, important guests or high-status individuals, get central warmth and prime seating. Others spread out, filling the cooler ends and corners. Tasks divide along lines of gender, age, skill and standing. Orders and requests blur, depending on who is talking and who is listening. You learn your place quickly, not just in a harsh way, but for practical reasons. Too many leaders, nothing gets done. Too few respected voices, disputes never end. In winter, when you cannot simply avoid people, knowing where you stand is its own kind of comfort, even if you sometimes fantasize about pushing certain people closer to the drafty door. You can map the social order just by watching a meal. The head of the household sits where heat and light are best, close enough to the hearth to be warm, far enough to avoid random sparks. Important guests cluster nearby. Their bowls are filled quickly, their portions a little more generous. As you move outward from that warm centre, the social temperature cools along with the air. By the time you reach the far end, you are on the fringe both physically and politically. Sleeping arrangements follow the same logic. The warmest, driest spots go to those whose survival benefits everyone else the most, or whose status demands it. Elder with crucial knowledge, central. Skilled sailor or fighter, central. Respected matriarch who can ruin your week with 3 calm sentences, also central. Younger people, lower status folk, and the very unlucky end up closer to the door, where drafts sneak in and the floor feels more like a slab of opinionated ice. Work mirrors this invisible seating chart. No one hands you a written job description. You absorb what people like you do and do not do. You know whose instructions you absolutely follow, whose suggestions are optional, and who is just loudly sharing ideas no one will act on. Skilled craftspeople get a certain room to complain. The person who knows how to keep the boat afloat or the loom running can get away with more eye rolls than the rest. Status is not only about birth, it is about what you offer the group. A clever trader who brings back good deals, a healer who does not lose many patients, a storyteller who can make a long dark evening feel shorter, all gather their own kind of gravity. When they speak during disputes, heads tilt. People pause. You're watching social weight in motion. Constant proximity magnifies every tiny imbalance. If someone abuses their bit of power, takes too much meat, hogs the best spot, or never lifts a hand during chores, resentment grows fast in a single room. You learn to express discontent sideways, through jokes, pointed silences, or by handing the worst task to the worst offender. Occasionally, someone gets pulled aside and spoken to in the calm, terrifying tone that means the entire house has had enough. For you, existing inside this layered structure is oddly reassuring. You know where to sit, when to talk, when to shut up, and whose eyebrow twitch means the mood just changed. In a season when the weather is chaos and the future is a vague concept called spring, the pattern of people around the fire stays almost comfortingly predictable. The hierarchy may not always be fair, but at least you know which side of the room you belong to, and whose cup you should definitely refill before your own. One day, almost without warning, the world changes pitch. The snow softens, the icy crust gives way, and you hear it, dripping. Tiny, persistent drops from the roof and tree branches, from places that have been frozen and silent for months. The yard turns into a mud-based obstacle course. The longhouse smells different now, less like enclosed winter, more like damp earth. It is not great, but it is honest. Animals grow restless. So do you. There is more light, and with it a rush of tasks, checking fields, repairing fences, seeing what survived. You step outside, feel cold air that is suddenly almost gentle, and realize you have done it. Another Viking winter, and you are still here. The sound of dripping becomes your new soundtrack. From the eaves, from stacked wood, from icicles that have clung on far longer than seems reasonable. Little streams carve paths through the snow, exposing patches of brown grass and mysterious objects you vaguely remember leaving outside in autumn. Every step is a gamble. Firm ground, hidden ice, or ankle-deep slush with opinions. Inside, the longhouse loosens its grip. The fire does not have to roar quite as fiercely. You can step a little further from the hearth without your bones complaining. The air is still smoky and crowded with people and animals and everything you own, but there is a faint freshness sneaking in through cracks that used to feel like pure menace. You open a door or a shutter a little wider, and it no longer feels like inviting death inside. The animals are the first to vote for spring with their hooves. Cows snort when you open the byre. Sheep crowd the threshold, blinking at the light, then immediately find the muddiest possible spot to decorate. You check their legs, their hooves, their general mood. If they made it through, you did something right. If any did not, you feel the loss in your chest and in your future meals. The work shifts from surviving to recovering. You walk the fields or rough ground where you grow what you can, poking at soil that still has ice underneath but is beginning to soften. Fences lean where snow pressed against them for months. Ropes, posts, tools, everything needs checking. You make a mental list, then pick somewhere to start because that is all you ever really do. The light is the strangest change. It lingers in the afternoons, slants in at angles you had almost forgotten. You notice dust in the air, streaks on the walls, the actual colours of people's clothing beneath the smoke stain. Faces you mostly saw by fire glow now exist in ordinary daylight. Everyone looks a little older and somehow more solid, like winter carved away everything that was not necessary. You feel it in your body too. Moving outside does not steal your breath immediately. Your shoulders unclench, just a little. You start planning more than a few days ahead, next season, next voyage, next set of repairs. Hope does not arrive as a trumpet blast. It sneaks in as mud on your boots, sore muscles from new kinds of work, and the quiet realization that you can stand still outdoors for a full minute without regretting every life choice. Spring is not safety. Storms still come, food stores still run low, accidents still happen. But as you stand in the dripping yard, watching thin trickles of water vanish into thawing ground, you understand why people celebrate this moment in every culture that has ever endured a real winter. You're chilled and tired, but you are here. The long winter did not win.